So, Merry Christmas. I'm recording this on, what time is it? Late Christmas Eve, early Christmas Day. Yeah, whatever you want to consider it. And I wanted to do something fun. And I thought, I don't know, I've been watching a lot of stuff about Star Wars. And I wanted to basically do a video on what they should have fucking done for the Star Wars universe when Disney bought it. I'm probably going to entitle this What I Would Do with Star Wars Episode 7. Just know that basically I think that makes a better title than What I Would Do with Disney Star Wars. So I'm kind of talking in its totality. But I think they made some pretty damn big mistakes with Star Wars. I don't know, everything after Disney bought it. And this is what I would do. So, step one, they eliminated all of that fucking extended universe crap that was the old, like, books from the 80s and 90s. I believe that was a good call because there's so much of it, and there was some bad with the good. And if you're going to be making movies, like, make the good parts, don't make the bad parts. Makes sense to me. And then, like, that becomes what are the good parts. And that's kind of up for debate, really. Like, pretty much the whole fandom that read the books liked the Thrawn trilogy. That's probably where I would have taken my inspiration for a lot of shit for episodes 7, 8, and 9. But I definitely would have, I don't know, changed some shit and made some alterations. And most of that has to do with the state of the Star Wars universe as of the end of the Return of the Jedi. Like, this is the thing nobody really wants to talk about, is basically episode 7 needed to be handled by a master because of how Return of the Jedi ended. Return of the Jedi ended with, and then there's peace in the galaxy and, everybody goes home. Kind of hard to get another movie after that. And I think that's why George Lucas's plan was give it 20 or 30 years and come back and do a time jump that amount forward. Now the actors will be that age, and there might be strife in the galaxy in 30 years that there's not right now. And these are Star Wars, and like, there kind of needs to be conflict in order for there to be stories to tell. And I think this is one of the problems that they ran into with that Acolyte bullshit. The interesting things they did in the Acolyte break the fucking universe. Again, we need to consider where the universe is, not only after Return of the Jedi, but like with that Acolyte stuff, they set that like 100 years before Phantom Menace in the High Republic, quote unquote. And one of the things you need to consider is basically before the Phantom Menace, there was 1,000 years of boredom, according to the books. Could we rewrite that? Yes, but they were choosing not to. They were choosing just to tell stories about the boring era. So, looking at where we want to go and things we want to do with the Star Wars universe, I think it's pretty easy to be like, people like them Jedis. People like the Sith. Let's get some of them Jedis and the Sith and maybe tell a story about that. Or the fucking Mandalorians. People love them. Or the fucking, like, scoundrel smugglers like Han Solo and Lando and shit. You could tell stories with them. They chose to do none of that. Like, I don't know. So, with the state of the universe at the end of Return of the Jedi, all the Sith are pretty much dead, according to what we know. We could talk about the people who could potentially be alive and how they fucked that up. We will in a second. But that leaves you with a villain problem. And we'll solve that shortly, but you also have a hero problem. There is no Jedi Order. Luke is the last of the Jedi. Like, you could make an argument that Ezra Bridger is out there in space somewhere, and Ahsoka is somewhere out there. But Ahsoka's not really even a Jedi anymore, which really just doesn't make sense to me. Like, given everything that happened, I kind of figured that when all of the Jedi died, you could have Yoda force communicate with Ahsoka and be like, "A Jedi, are you again?" Like, problem solved. But no, we're gonna do some weird shit with her, probably. Sorry, I'm vaping. God damn. I don't really have a plan for any of this. I'm just getting really fucking high and talking Star Wars for probably an hour. So if you don't want that, this is your fair warning. So, for the good guys, the obvious answer is to have Luke go to one of the old Jedi enclaves or one of the old Jedi temples, something like that, and literally build up a camp around it to be a new Jedi academy, new Jedi temple, whatever. Like, in the 30 years from Return of the Jedi to God damn, to Episode 7, you could have trained, I don't know, probably hundreds of Jedi if you really wanted to, but you definitely could make it to where Luke had 30 to 40 fully trained Jedi and then a bunch of Padawans. That, I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility. And that is a much more interesting place to tell a story from than I'm the last of the Jedi, and there shall be no more, because I'm gonna throw my lightsaber away. And now I'm a grumpy old Luke. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to decide to kill kids at some point, because, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Fuck Star Wars Episode 8 so fucking hard. Like, really, 7, 8, and 9, fuck them all. Those movies sucked so bad. Then there's the bad guys. And basically the problem that you're running into with the bad guys is Imperial remnants or whatever. Sure, those are probably out there. You could probably have that. But they probably don't have a fucking Death Star 100 times the size of the one the Empire built. It's probably not built into a planet, and it probably can't kill 6 or 7 planets at once. And to do that is just breaking the universe more. Like, this is part of the problem with Episode 7, is like, for the bad guys, they were like, hey, look, there's a spooky Sith dude, and he has a Darth Vader looking dude. Oh, and they have an empire, somehow. Like, I'm sorry, but this is the shit that broke the fucking universe for me. Like, I started being pissed about Star Wars in Episode 7, not 8. Like, when they killed Han Solo, I about got up and walked out of the fucking theater. Especially having him murdered by his own son. So many missteps were taken there, and the villains are a number one. Now, I think they definitely had the right idea with Snoke. But what I would have done with Snoke is I would have made Snoke immune, which is those banking clan guys that have really long heads. I would have made him one of those, and I would have made him Darth Plagueis, who never really died. Like, Palpatine thought he killed him. Missed the mark. Like, that dude's out there, or could be if you interpret it that, Palpatine didn't quite kill him all the way. And that would be more interesting than somehow Palpatine returns. And having him play Snoke, who we don't even know who this is or why he's important, and then slowly revealing that mystery box and flashbacks and other things as to the fact that he was fucking Darth Sidious's master. That's a badass arc. There's places to go there. And even once you get through that, or as a part of that, you could discover that there is a greater Sith Empire that has been, waiting in the wings outside the galaxy for, 20,000 years or some shit, since the Old Republic days. And that Plagueis is, using that shit to his advantage somehow. Or you could make them the big bad after you deal with Plagueis. And this would be the thing that... Sorry. Don't smoke weed, kids. But this would be the thing with... If you did these movies right, and you build up a decent amount of Jedi, and you build up a decent amount of Sith, you can tell stories that are 100 Sith and 100 Jedi going at it with swords and shit like the Old Republic. And you could do that in a couple of movies. I would definitely make the first trilogy dealing with Plagueis, and then maybe the Sith Empire gets, brought in somehow at the end. And I would definitely make that like, it's, like in Knights of the Old Republic, there's the Sith Emperor who, in Knights of the Old Republic, there were like the Sith on Korriban, and then there were the real Sith that like the people on Korriban were basing their shit off of. And as it turns out, all of the Sith we've been dealing with for the last 10,000 years or whatever are, imitators. Basically, they're not true Sith. We've been dealing with the Coke Light or Diet Coke version of Sith, basically. And, you make the fucking Sith Empire and shit a real threat that, like, is trying to take over the galaxy in probably the trilogy after the trilogy about Darth Plagueis. And this is how you should think when you plan Star Wars, is not, what am I introducing that is going to help Episode 7? You should already be planning out, 10, 11, and 12. And where you want the story to go. Because things that you introduce to the sandbox can be brought back at any time. And this is why some people it's okay to kill off. Others you really shouldn't. And one of those for me was Darth Maul. The other interesting potential dark side user that could be a part of any new thing going forward is, last we heard, Maul got robot legs and was back from the dead in Clone Wars, and they hadn't made Rebels yet. And I would have used him exactly as they used him in Rebels, but I would have had him live through the damn shit. Having him killed in a single sword stroke by Obi-Wan Kenobi is just a giant fuck you to the villain problem. Like, they have horrible villains. And their solution is, well, we're going to take all the ones we have that do work and we're going to kill them off. Or make them some rando clone from Palpatine instead of being Darth Plagueis. Like, why is it that at every opportunity we have to do something cool, we decide to do something retarded? Is that just the Disney corporate policy? It's gotta be. Vaping again. Okay. God damn. Anyway, so Disney Star Wars, as far as I could tell, is just fucked for running because of this. Hey, we don't take our villains seriously, and we don't think Jedi are important to Star Wars. And don't worry, we can replace 100 trained Jedi from Luke's Academy with one girl from a desert planet who has special powers somehow that we don't know about, because that's never been done in Star Wars before. And this is the point where they would probably say that they're making it rhyme like George Lucas. George Lucas didn't make shit rhyme by having every sentence end with the word stop. You know, he did different shit. You know, I can't think of anything that rhymes with stop, so I'm just going to keep using the word stop. Wow, that's simply stunning. God damn. As far as, you know, the other characters they introduced besides Rey, like, my issues with Rey aren't so much that she's a Mary Sue. It's that there's only a couple reasons you could have to make her a Mary Sue, and basically the one that makes the universe work is that she's a Skywalker. She should have been Luke's daughter. Luke's daughter with some sort of dark side user. Like, think Mara Jade. Like, I would make a Mara Jade like character and make her fucking like total dark side, but yet Luke wins her over to the light and they have a kid together before she just gets drawn back to the dark or something like that. It'd make it tragic. Like, the reason she's in hiding is because mommy wants to find daddy and kill him, and so we can't have the kid next to daddy because they'd be able to find him or some shit. Meanwhile, if she's hidden in the force on some desolate planet or whatever, she'll never find her there. That would at least make some sense. Having the crux of your whole story be that Emperor Palpatine had sex, well, that's a bold choice. Making her a secret Palpatine is quite frankly the most stupid thing I can think to do. Like, you could make her a secret Kenobi, that might work. But really, the Star Wars saga is the story of the Skywalkers. It's Anakin and Luke's story, and the next person that would be Luke's son or daughter. Okay, maybe you could say, oh, well, Leia has kids with Han. Okay, well, they can be included too, but like, those were secondary characters. Luke was the main character of the original movies. His offspring should be the focus of the next movie. And if you want to make her a secret Skywalker and play Desert Rat and do all of that shit, so it rhymes with episode 1 and 4, okay. But maybe we shouldn't make a poem where every sentence ends with the word stop. And that's kind of what they did here. They copied A New Hope so fucking hard. And like, some of that is they're trying to relaunch this for a new generation or some shit, and they wanted to hook in new fans. Why on earth would you worry about hooking new fans into Star Wars? Star Wars is already the biggest IP on earth. Damn. You need to worry about keeping the fans you got first. And if you can add new fans, great. Like, I'd love for people to find Star Wars, but at this point, if they don't already like Star Wars, they probably ain't gonna. Like, it's been around for 30, 50 years, whatever it is. I guess 1977 is 49 years ago now. It's hard to think, hard to imagine. So, basically, as far as I can tell, the only characters left in the sandbox from a dark side perspective that are worth playing with at all after the Return of the Jedi is Darth Maul, if he's still alive, because we didn't know yet. Darth Plagueis, possibly, if you consider that Palpatine might not have killed him all the way, because that happens off screen, and like, there is something to the rhyming thing, and this is where it would rhyme, is the first mention of Plagueis wasn't until Revenge of the Sith. It was mentioned briefly. A footnote. And as it turns out, the whole end of the series is about him. And what he does. I think that would be very telling. That, and I think bringing Maul back for similar reasons as his right hand would make a lot of sense. Plagueis knew of Maul. He knew where he was. And honestly, to me, it makes a shitload more sense that Maul was, probably saved himself somehow, but then called out to Plagueis in the Force, and Plagueis is the one that found him and took him somewhere and had him repaired and robot legs and all of that. It makes way more sense than that bullshit they told in the Clone Wars. And I wouldn't want to retcon anything directly made by George Lucas, but damn, that would be tempting. I'd want to rewatch those episodes of the Clone Wars and see exactly what was said and shown, and like what is his exact origin story, and how could we work Plagueis into it. Because putting those two characters together, who both hated Palpatine, my guess is Plagueis probably didn't hate him. Like, he did what he was expected to do. And my theory about how you say Plagueis lived is that Plagueis knew Palpatine was going to try to kill him, and Plagueis thought that it was to his advantage to step out of the spotlight while this shit went down in case it went poorly. So that's why, Palpatine was allowed to believe that he killed Plagueis, basically. He shrunk away into the Force and went into hiding like Yoda did or some shit so he couldn't be detected by fucking Palpatine. Because Sith tend to notice if there's another one in the galaxy or not. And it's one of those things that you could say that Plagueis was more than happy to watch his plan unfold from relative safety, while Palpatine took all the risks. I think that story sells. And then Darth Maul is out there and a dark side user, and Plagueis knows of him, and now he wants revenge on Palpatine. Having Plagueis swoop in at some point and rescue Maul from Palpatine's clutches, that could be how you connect those two, and then you just have them running as, the rule of two, basically. Well, they've come to the conclusion that either Palpatine's going to succeed or he's going to fucking die, and if he dies, then there needs to still be Sith, and that's Plagueis is basically running the backup plan now with Darth Maul, and that becomes a lot more serious of a plan when Palpatine fucking dies. And he should die in Return of the Jedi and stay dead. All this bullshit about bringing Palpatine back from the fucking dead, man. Like, I cannot think of a more retarded thing to do in Episode 9 than that. Although they had painted themselves into such a corner that they had to. And like, this is really my issue with 7, 8, and 9 is, when you have opportunities to grow your universe, you should grow it so that way there's new story opportunities. You don't, make interesting stories by destroying the universe to the point where there's only 3 options. Either Luke kills him, Luke dies, or, they both just are miserable bastards the rest of their life, or something like that. Like, you've made it to where those are the options. Congratulations. You had a giant Star Wars sandbox to play in where you could tell any story you want anywhere in the universe. And to keep with the theme of the original 6, it should probably be about Skywalkers. That's a free hint for you. And Disney would still fuck that up. But it really does annoy me that they shrink their sandbox. Like, you should be looking at the periphery of it as to who could still be alive to be brought back in to tie old shit in with new shit. And, you shouldn't be doing, this person really isn't dead every week. But for Plagueis, it makes sense. It wouldn't make sense to bring Vader back that way. Uh, Boba Fett, uh, personally, the first shot of the first movie released as new Star Wars, if I controlled things, would be fucking Boba Fett's hand coming out of the fucking maw of the sand beast and crawling back onto the land, getting up and walking off. And that would be like the first shot after the fucking what is that called? The crawl, whatever it is, the opening crawl. That's how I would start off the movie. Like, is he in the rest of the movie? I don't know, but like at some point, like that movie would be about Han Solo, as it probably should have been. Like maybe that's an assumption on my part. You could have made it about any of them, but I don't hate the fact that they made the first movie about Han Solo. And if you're gonna do that, seeing Boba Fett crawl out of the sand beast is almost a necessity to me because we never really saw those two go at it. And instead of having Han Solo killed by his fucking kid, uh, you could have Han Solo die in some way saving everyone. And he dies at the hands of either the Empire or Boba Fett or somebody like that. But he should definitely fight Boba Fett at some point. That's kind of my point, is a lot of things we never got to see in the original movies because they were limited by technology. We're not limited by technology at all now. You can do anything you want. We can make green space lizards that fight with fucking lightsabers and jump and swirl through the air. We can do anything. Quit acting like you can't. And like, the reason that the original movies had very few Jedi was because making lightsabers on screen was expensive back then. That's no longer a thing, so let's have a few more Jedi. This is basically what they did with the prequels. And I think there's a pretty easy case to be made for a way that you have at least 30 or 40 Jedi again, and then Maul and Plagueis at the very least on the dark side. And from there, you can at least tell interesting stories. Maul and Plagueis being dark side users would pretty readily be able to go pick up Imperial remnants. And I think that would be what they would be in the business of, is trying to form the Imperial remnants into some sort of a Sith thing to keep the fight on, basically. Because like the whole like slow, creepy, claw our way to power behind the scenes Palpatine route, it's kind of been done. What are the odds that they're going to let 2 secret Sith Emperors happen? Probably not very good. So with that in mind, I think the obvious route is, hey, there's all these Imperial remnants and they don't have leaders, and they're used to being led by Sith. And if they have a lightsaber put to their fucking throat, they're probably going to serve the goddamn Sith. You probably wouldn't even have to do that to most of them. They're hated and despised all over the fucking universe, as we saw in the shit they made. And I think that's pretty much how it should be. Like, I think they would be viewed like ex-Nazis were in Europe. So they don't have many places to go. And then that gives, 2 Sith an army of fucking minions. And you could even say, oh, well, in the intervening years, Plagueis had Maul train a bunch of Sith assassins, which they definitely did use. That's, for those who aren't in the know, Darth Maul was actually a Sith assassin at the time. Darth Plagueis was alive in the events of the Phantom Menace, and he was the Dark Lord of the Sith, and his apprentice was Palpatine. And Maul was Palpatine's Sith assassin that he was telling was his apprentice or whatever. So technically Darth Maul was never a Darth. There can be only 2, whatever, and that's how the Sith have always operated in the canon, is at least for the last 1,000 years during the rule of 2, there are 2 Sith, a master and an apprentice. They might train, 20 or 30 Sith assassins, but they are, basic bitch force abilities with pretty decent lightsaber skills. They're not someone who could ever truly lead the Sith, if that makes any sense. They're not an inheritor to the throne, and they're picked because they're not. If you're the Sith, you don't want to make a bunch of competitors, and having some like lower level Sith assassins makes sense because of how combat effective they are, but yet at the same time they're no real threat to you and your apprentice. And I think maintaining that kind of thing into the future would make sense. So giving them a dozen Inquisitor type people, in case you're unfamiliar, in the TV show Rebels that they made, the Inquisitors, those are Sith assassins. That's how they operate and look and everything. The whole red bladed lightsabers and double lightsabers and shit, and just everything about them, that's straight out of the Old Republic, and it's Sith assassins. So giving them a small army of that, and probably whatever's left of the Empire that didn't go Republic, it puts you in the interesting position where you can have giant space battles, you can have lightsaber duels, you can have, some sort of Republic troopers that are the inheritors to the Stormtrooper bullshit, which is inherited from the clone troopers. So like they'd be in some sort of white plastic armor and have blaster rifles probably, and they would be fighting, whatever the Empire is doing. And that could get interesting because you pushed them now, and they're crazy mad scientist types. Like they could go droid army, they could go full on clones again, they could start abducting children and cloning some of each of them or some shit. Like you could make up whatever you want as far as how they're getting, Sith troopers is what I would call. I wouldn't call them stormtroopers anymore. Like I would end that shit. And that is one of the things that they made that was a big mistake in the way they handled 7, 8, and 9. They didn't create new shit. They created nostalgic shit. So like everybody was still flying X-Wings. Everybody was still flying TIE fighters. And they should have made Rogue One and maybe other movies in that era to scratch that nostalgia shit for the people that like that. But at the same time, it doesn't make sense that in a universe where we watch technology change every 20 or 30 years, going from like the Clone Wars to the Imperial era, it doesn't make sense 30 years in the future everybody'd still be flying some X-Wing looking craft. Make new shit. Quit making nostalgia bait. Look at what they did with the Mandalorian and his ship versus like Slave One with Boba Fett. They're similar bounty hunting ships. They're kind of like the fucking Caravan or RV of the Star Wars universe, but they're completely different ships. That's what you should do with the X-Wing and TIE fighters and all that shit. It should be an evolution of what thing is next. And honestly, the TIE fighters never made sense to me. Like, I get it is the Empire and they're wanting to make, craft that can only land on their shit or whatever, but like from a sheer practical standpoint, it doesn't make much sense to have fighters that can't land on a planet. And this is where somebody's going to be like, well, technically they did in this Rebels episode or whatever. And like everything Rebels did to try to explain how TIE fighters work just broke it more for me. Like, I think it was in Mandalorian, they had ones that had fold-up wings. That makes more sense. Like, more of that, please. Less of, I don't know. I had a TIE Fighter toy as a kid, and it had a big hatch on the top that was where you put the little man in. It was a micro machine. And that is exactly how the in-universe TIE Fighter hatches work, according to Disney. And I'm like, I don't know. I always kind of figured that it wasn't like a giant micro machine toy. I don't know what I expected, but I don't know. I almost laughed out loud when I saw that shit. Anyway, just from a general design aesthetic, though, forget everything that came before, make new shit, and make it look cool. Like, if you want to keep some elements of it or whatever, okay. But, like, we've seen pretty clearly that tech in the Star Wars universe advances at a pretty fast pace, actually. Or at least, different ships, different designs, different that, like, Mandalorians are wearing the same armor they wore 1,000 years ago or whatever because they're Mandalorians. Everybody else seems to change tech regularly. One of the best things I thought the Disney people did was The Mandalorian. At least the first 2 seasons of it were pretty goddamn good. And, like, you should understand where I come from the Mandalorian shit from. Like, I fell in love with Mandalorians when I first saw Boba Fett. When I watched Empire Strikes Back originally, that's all the Star Wars there was 3 movies and a holiday special and some shitty Ewok movies. And I thought Boba Fett was the coolest character then. And then we got the prequels and all that shit, and Jango Fett and the clones, and there was a shitload of lore in the books and shit about all that. And I got super heavy into that, so maybe this is part of my bias, but I know a fuck ton of other people that are really into the Mandalorian shit. And then you have the popularity of the Mandalorian show clearly demonstrated that my take was right, and I would have made some sort of Mandalorian project. I think the temptation would have been to make it Boba Fett, and that would have been a mistake, but it's a mistake I probably would have made. So, we can criticize Disney or whatever, but I fully admit that what they did by creating a new Mandalorian character and then having him find Boba Fett, probably the better way to go. You're building the universe out. There's no reason to have every, Mandalorian thing ever be about Boba Fett. And honestly, the actor that plays Boba Fett is getting older. You probably don't have a lot of shit with him. It's better to future-proof yourself and have other Mandalorians to tell stories about. And then the obvious place to raid for more characters for that is their animation, because they had a shitload of Mandalorians show up in all their animated shit. I don't know. There's lots of room there, and I'm glad they're doing that. And at least they do that right, I guess. But, like, it infuriates me to no hell that they can't seem to figure out the rest of this shit. And it's pretty easy. You just hire people to make Star Wars that don't hate Star Wars and aren't J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams, I loved some of his early shit, but his shit has the same problem. And it's this, I'm going to make a mystery box, and I don't know what the answer is. So I'm making it up as you guys do. That gets old after a while, dude. Like, there's still shit from Lost that pisses me off. Like, there's zero explanation for the goddamn polar bears, really. Like, they're there. They're come from cages on the island. Why the fuck were there polar bears there? Anyway. Like, not that I'm bitter, but putting that fucker in charge of the Star Wars universe after he broke the Star Trek universe, like, I can't believe I was ever excited for this. But the reason I was excited for this is because he broke the Star Trek universe by making it Star Wars-like. And I was like, well, I don't like anything he's done so far, but he seems to be a fucking huge Star Wars nerd, so he probably can't do this wrong. Boy, was I mistaken. And really, it wasn't even so much shit he did as it was Rian Johnson that followed him, but there was plenty of shit done in Force Awakens that makes me fucking roll my eyes, too. And again, to give credit where credit is due, one of the things they did right was having one of the Solo kids go dark side and join up with Maul and Plagueis. Basically put Kylo Ren in with all them as one of their Sith assassins. That could be interesting. That probably is what I would have done. And, the whole Knights of Ren thing. Like, if you give those people lightsabers, all of a sudden they're Sith assassins. So, I don't hate the design aesthetic of a lot of this Disney shit. I think a lot of the stuff they did that was new was good. The stuff that they did that was based on shit from the 70s, I thought looked like shit. For the most part. Kylo Ren, I think they got right, and I think they were heavily basing him off of Darth Vader, but they also threw in a bunch of like Japanese samurai shit and did their own thing. I thought Kylo Ren was one of the better parts of all of that bullshit. So, again, design aesthetic wise, we'd keep that. I would never have him remove his helmet until whenever it was his time to end. Whether that's being turned back to the light or dying, his helmet would stay on until 5 minutes before that decision is made. That whole we're gonna reveal, like, I do not for the life of me understand the compulsion to show actors' faces on screen. I don't give a fuck if he's a sci-fi character and he always wears a goddamn helmet. Like, sure, show him without his helmet shaving or whatever once, but like, he's Boba Fett. He needs to have his helmet on most of the goddamn time. Most Mandalorians should have their helmet on most of the goddamn time. Why? Because otherwise they're not Mandalorians. And like, if you had a helmet that protected you against fucking lightsabers and laser blasts and shit, and had enhanced vision, would you take it off for any reason other than to shave or eat? Maybe around camp or whatever, or they're in their ship. Okay, they could take their helmets off there. Unless they live by the creed or whatever, but that shit doesn't make any sense really either. But I would have it literally to where most Mandalorians keep their helmets on in public unless they're eating or shaving or some shit. Because that would make sense. It's not that they always wear the helmet or can take it on and off or whatever. It's, the helmet does many things for them. If they're out in public walking around, they probably have it on. One of those kind of things. It's not some hard and fast rule. There's no religion about wearing a helmet all the goddamn time. Like, this is where they kind of fucked up the Mandalorians to some extent with that Mandalorian show. But at least they fixed Boba Fett because, like, for years we got to hear about how Boba Fett was a fake Mandalorian. Because something somewhere in the Clone Wars had peace-loving shitheel Mandalorians accuse him of being a fake Mandalorian. No, they just don't like Boba Fett because Boba Fett's a fucking clone of Jango Fett, and Jango Fett comes from the other Mandalorians that they killed off. So, isn't it funny how we always go pacifist as soon as we're done fucking ethnic cleansing our enemies? I don't know. I probably shouldn't worry so much about Boba Fett's reputation, but again, kind of invested. I've been a fan since I was like 5. And like, that stupid Book of Boba Fett show. Like, it had so much potential. I love Ming Na, the Asian lady who he saves in the desert and makes a half robot or some shit that doesn't make sense. Okay, because we couldn't just have her be saved by a doctor. Apparently that's going too far. The only option was a mod shop where we could turn her fucking abdomen into fucking steel or some shit. What the fuck was that? And then there's the like scooter gang that comes to their rescue. I seriously think that was them trying to do George Lucas shit, because George Lucas does a lot of like weird like 50s car culture shit just thrown into Star Wars to be weird, I think. And because he digs it. And their answer to that was to create hover Vespas and have a biker gang. A biker gang of people that drive Vespas in a world that has swoop bikes. Like those bikes you see the scout troopers riding in Return of the Jedi, those are swoop bikes. They're all over the fucking Empire. They go faster than shit. They don't look like stupid scooters. Why wouldn't you have them be riding those? And you could say, oh, well, they put some custom shit on it, and they're nerds, and they have bad taste, so there's a lot of chrome. Okay, like make chopper swoop bikes. Don't make Vespas. Please, dear God. You know, if I was in some horrible situation and the people to show up to save me was a group of 12 millennials or Gen Zers on Vespas, that would just about sum up the fucking year I've been having. So, as far as the rest of the universe goes, I don't even care so much about where we go from the position that I brought us to, where Luke has a Jedi Academy and at least 40 fully trained Jedi training more Jedi. So that it's well underway to have a Jedi Order reestablished. Because the Jedi must die. Last of the Jedi will I be. Now I'm going to throw this lightsaber over my shoulder nonchalantly. Dear sweet Jesus, just no. Like, grow a pair of fucking balls or whatever and have Jedi that are what they should be. Like, a lot of the Disney Star Wars shit to me, the answer is we fucking had our balls drop off. like, like the Joker at Dark Knight. So, what happened? Did your balls drop off? Because it certainly seems to me like whoever started making decisions at Star Wars needed to either grow a spine or some balls or both. And like clearly Kathleen Kennedy was given entirely too much power because she knows what she's doing. She has 20 years of experience being, Steven Spielberg's executive assistant. So as far as where we go from there, like I almost think it doesn't matter. Anywhere is better than what they did, but this is where I would probably take the story. Now that we're 50 minutes into this shit, we might have to make this a two-parter. So the obvious place to take the story is that this developing Sith empire or Imperial remnant led by Sith is still out there. It's still in numbers, and they're fighting an open war for the galaxy still. And maybe it's one of those things where you could have them kind of go away and come back, and maybe like this is Plagueis and Darth Maul and whoever have been building some sort of hidden empire or whatever using Imperial remnants. Could be, and they come back, and this is after 30 years of peace. Now there's war again. That makes more sense to me than most things. I'd be open to other ideas though. And from there, I would have, 3 to 6 episodes covering this war. Probably 3. I think that would be the right number. And you could have whatever you want happen that brings Luke and Plagueis into the same room in episode 9. And maybe Darth Maul dies in episode 8. I think that would make sense. Like, nobody big dies in the first movie because we're still telling stories in this sandbox and whatever. And I would have episode 9 ultimately end with Plagueis dying, but signaling some greater Sith empire that he always had in his back pocket. And in order to understand what that is, you'd have to go back to the Old Republic shit. But in the Old Republic shit, in the vastness in between the galaxies, like everything we see in Star Wars takes place in one galaxy. Well, out in the black void between galaxies waits a whole shitload of Sith. They've been there, multiple times in the Old Republic canon. I don't think it's a huge stretch to say they're still there. And having Plagueis have some sort of means of drawing them back into the fucking galaxy as like the ultimate, no matter what I win, kind of like a suicide vest sort of thing. That's how I would do the next trilogy. Is now we're dealing with the consequences of Plagueis triggering some sort of force artifact that sent a signal that brings the Sith back. Maybe it awakens them from cryo sleep or some shit. I don't know. You can make up whatever you want. And from there is where I would take, 10, 11, and 12. Past that, I don't know. I haven't really thought that much about this. I really haven't thought much about this in one way or the other until 5 minutes before making this. That probably shows in the incoherent hour-long ramble while smoking weed. But, that's kind of the fun of this, right? Is it's all kind of off the cuff. And I guarantee you that whatever I've said in this hour is 120% better than anything Disney Star Wars ever made. And this is the part to me, is it's not that they are bad at making Star Wars. It's that they bought Star Wars and went, how do we make this into something that we can fucking just make a plastic lunchbox for the rest of our fucking lives? Like, we're going to kill its soul and then expect people to still watch it. We're going to completely fundamentally misunderstand the universe and make a fucking sequel trilogy that is pure nostalgia bait because we don't know what else to do. Don't have anyone actually creative write you a fucking story. I don't know. I hate the fact that Disney owns Star Wars. And the real interesting part to me wouldn't even be what you do with 7 through 12. That would be an afterthought. That is building a greater universe for us to play in. The next thing I would do is I would have a TV division that made a bunch of shit for Disney Plus that basically we're building new characters. Or we're bringing things from animation into live action, like Rebels. Like, I wouldn't make a Boba Fett show. I would make a Boba Fett movie. Or series of movies. And one of the things I don't understand why they don't do this is make shit at a production quality level, yeah, of The Mandalorian. Make 30 episodes of that shit, cut them into 2.5-hour movies, and release one of those things every 3 months. Make it a serial. Make it a serial of fucking movies, and you could say every 6 months, every 3 months, every year, however you want to pace them out. But make them at that quality level of The Mandalorian, and if you're gonna cheap out on them by doing them at TV quality level like that, make it like a every 2 to 3 months kind of a thing. Put them out there quick. You'd make a fuck ton of money. And I think it's one of those things that the first people to do that would be laughed at, and they'd be laughed at until they were billionaires. Like, everyone thinks, oh, well, we need to have effects driven this and whatever. We need to have, shit needs to cost $1 bajillion. I think The Mandalorian pretty well proved that you could make really good looking shit for not much money if you use the tech right. And that's the future of Star Wars to me, is let's make this shit cheap and let's make a bunch of it. Don't make it, bad looking, but don't make it look like Transformers Dark of the Moon or whatever either. It doesn't need to. Like, our CGI and shit has gotten to a point where really, if you use it appropriately, it doesn't cost much money. And when I say use it appropriately, I mean when you see a dude in a suit of armor, you just make the armor and you put him in it. You don't create a CGI file for it. Like Iron Man. Amazing how cheap shit gets when you start doing crazy shit like making it good. But that would be one of the things I would like to do in addition to whatever mainline series of movies you did, is play around with shit like that. Do a Boba Fett movie. Do, Rogue One was a stroke of genius. More shit like that where, like, hey, there's a gap here where we could tell a story. Let's tell a story there. And, like, that's how I would play in the nostalgia era. I would make movies that fill in holes between the movies or some shit like that. If anything but, hey, let's just remake the original trilogy but with shittier actors and better special effects. It's really sad to me that they've destroyed Star Wars to the point they have. Like, for me, Star Wars was always a big deal at Christmas because the movies came out in the summer, but the DVDs came out for the Christmas season. And as a result of that, I got Star Wars for Christmas multiple years in a row. So that's why we're talking about this tonight. I thought it would be fun. I'm kind of starting to wind this up here because I was thinking this was going to be about an hour. And really, we've covered most of what I wanted to talk about. This is kind of my vision of the future of Star Wars that they completely just fucking threw away when they did the awful shit that they did. They didn't have to do my shit, but my point is I barely think about this. Like, this occupies less than 1% of my, like, thoughts ever. And in an hour wall high, we can lay out good choices versus bad choices for building a fucking universe. And that's the real issue to me, is that they treated this like it was making another movie and not like, hey, this is the ultimate sandbox and we're going to expand the universe so we can tell more stories and, like, at least from their perspective, keep the fucking cash cow alive. Like, why would you, like, the Rian Johnson shit actively destroyed much of the Star Wars universe and fandom. And I think it's one of those things that was his intention. He didn't like Star Wars. He said so many times. And I'm not saying everyone who makes Star Wars needs to be a fanboy. I don't think that would be good either. But having people who say they actively hate Star Wars make a giant critical middle piece of your trilogy, I think we can all agree maybe we shouldn't have done that. As far as the rest of this shit goes, it's basically just, hey, have Jedi, have Sith, have a war. Like, have pilots and smugglers and Mandalorians and all the rest of that shit too, don't get me wrong, but you should get that this story is about the Skywalkers and the struggle and power between the Jedi and the Sith for the galaxy. And if you're not going to have all of that represented, it's no longer Star Wars. Which I put it to you, by episode 9, they had achieved. Like, the whole end of episode 8 with the Jedi and Sith are dead. Come with me, Rey. Be my lover and we'll destroy the galaxy and all of that shit. Like, okay, that was weird. And then to follow that up with, okay, Palpatine is back. Like, what the fuck? Maybe if you'd had a plan going in that had, I don't know, like, what we laid out here is a better plan for the future of Star Wars than what they did. And they had 5 years, if I remember right. Like, they bought that shit in 2012 and didn't have a Star Wars product come out until, like, 2016 or 2017. You had 4 or 5 years to think about how you wanted to handle the reintroduction of Star Wars, and you failed miserably because you're creatively bankrupt, basically. Fuck Disney. That's the real message of this, is basically anyone could do your job better than you. Even me, high at 2 in the morning, talking to nobody here on YouTube, knows more about how to make money using your fucking IP than you do. I think we're gonna call it good with one part here. Wrap up and maybe do some final thoughts. But final thoughts. I think Darth Maul is a really underutilized and wasted character. Like, they used him in animation, and the second that we knew he lived through being cut in half, he's now one of the most interesting toys to drag out of the toy box and throw into any situation, because he's technically not affiliated with anyone and super dark side, and like, he could just cause chaos. And now imagine him with a master who fucking agrees with him. I want to see that movie. I want to see the movie where Luke rebuilds the Jedi Order and leaves the galaxy in light and hope instead of fucking shrouded in darkness with no Jedi. I want to see the movie where Luke was everything he was in our minds when we were children. I want to see the movie where Luke is a fucking hero again, and he's not some fucking loser sitting on a planet drinking green milk, bitching about the fact that he wishes the universe was a different way. Like, we have enough of that in our real lives. And maybe this is art imitating life, in that the struggle against the empire, in our case, the United States government, is such that, like, it's hopeless and you might as well go drink green milk with fucking Luke. And to me, that's some of why, like, Star Wars matters to me, is like, there's always some sort of a tale that is the thing that unites a culture. And for the culture that I grew up in, the two tales that dominated our storytelling were the heroes of World War II and what they did to create our world, and Star Wars. Those walked hand in hand, and maybe you could throw in George Washington and the Founding Fathers. And, they've been trying their damnedest to destroy the Founding Fathers, and they're trying their damnedest to destroy the heroes of World War II. And why not throw Star Wars under the fucking bus or into the wood chipper while you're at it? Stories matter. History matters more, but like, the stories we tell, and the fact that this story is a struggle of good versus evil and teaches a young man what's important in life. They don't want any of that shit, because basically any young man that watches Star Wars isn't going to be a part of any of their horse shit. This is why they destroyed it and left it in darkness, and probably aren't ever going to make a thing worth a goddamn. I don't know. I'm looking forward to The Mandalorian and Grogu, but I'm not going to go see it in theaters. I'm going to wait until it's for sale someplace and probably just buy it. I'm a pretty disillusioned Star Wars fan, and this is my take on what should have been done. Let me know if you agree or disagree, and I'm sorry about the coughing. It's hard to vape weed and talk about Star Wars and not cough at least a little at some point. So, Merry Christmas, you fucks, and I hope you liked the Star Wars talk. I'll see you guys later.